Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Big Man, which is me, Alex, and the Not So Big Man, which is James podcast. James, how are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. I feel like we are viewers a slight apology for the length between this podcast and the last one. We finished exams and we've been having a lot of fun. I think so. Have found it tricky. Lots of things going on, haven't we? So it's tricky to find time to organise this, but we are now here, and good set of things to talk about.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think an apology is owed, and to all of those waiting out, and apologies to LeBron James and BMW for not following up on our emails and talking about that. But yeah, I think it's been a fun few weeks, and both of us have been quite busy, so we're back to it now, and we've been raring to go. So to start off things, do a little summary of what's happened since we've gone. So the play-in tournament is finished. So we had in the Western Conference, we had the Memphis Grizzlies against the San Antonio Spurs and the Lakers against the Warriors. So some interesting matches up there, and obviously you can listen back to the first podcast and hear our predictions and see how wrong or right we got them. So the Grizzlies then went on to play the Warriors, as the Warriors lost to the Lakers and the Grizzlies beat the Spurs. And then the Grizzlies beat the Warriors and went on to play the Jazz in the round one of the playoffs, which we will talk about in a minute. And the Lakers went on to play the Suns in the first round of the playoffs as they beat the Warriors. So that summarises the Western Conference play-in tournament. The East, we had the Indiana Pacers face up against the Charlotte Hornets, and the Boston Celtics face up against the Washington Wizards. So the Indiana Pacers beat the Charlotte Hornets, which meant they went on to face the Wizards, who lost against the Celtics. Then the Wizards beat the Pacers, and they go on to play the 76ers in the round one of the playoffs in the East. And the Boston Celtics, as they beat the Wizards, went on to play the Brooklyn Nets in round one of the playoffs. So that's the East for you. So in this podcast, we will be talking about the first round of the playoffs, and there's a lot to get into. But James, is there any surprises in that play-on tournament, or do you think it went to plan for most teams?
Generally, not too many surprises. I think, to be fair, the Warriors versus Grizzlies matchup was one that potentially could have gone either way. Steph Curry had been on an absolute tear towards the end of the season, and then carried that on into a lot of the playing games as well. I think I saw a stat or something that it's the first time there's going to be a finals or something without LeBron James or Steph Curry in it in like 10 or something years. I can't remember if that's accurate or something like that. So not seeing him in the playoffs this year will be interesting. But you know what? As a team, I think the Grizzlies are probably better. They've had a lot more kind of depth, unlike the Warriors this year, with Klay Thompson being out. That one could have gone either way, but I don't remember my prediction or something. I probably predicted Warriors. Probably got it wrong, to be honest. But nothing too surprising there, I'd say.
No, I think it was interesting. Obviously, it's a novel thing for the NBA. They've created this, or they've dreamed up this system to work for the playoffs. It's, we're yet to know whether it's going to be round again next year, but I quite like the idea of these one-off. We were saying earlier, I think we were jokingly saying that we'd rather every playoff be one game, because we don't have to look at 7 games when we're researching. But no, we do love it. We're stat nerds at heart, I think is the word. Without waiting anymore, should we get on to talk about round one of the playoffs in the next section?
Let's do it.
Right. Well, stick around, ladies and gents, and I hope you haven't got bored of us already, and it's why it's good to be back. So we'll see you in the next part. And we're back. It wasn't too long, I hope. And so we're going to start off with the West in round one of the playoffs. So this is where, the proper games get down, and we can get an idea of which teams are going to be challenging for that NBA championship. And well, let's start off with the Utah Jazz, who finished in the first seed, and the Grizzlies, who were the 8th seed, obviously getting in through that play-in tournament. I mean, just a quick summary of what happened. The Jazz brushed the Grizzlies aside, I think is probably a good way to describe it. James, how did you see it?
Yeah, so it was pretty convincing win for the Jazz. Although that first game was won by Memphis, I think, in the series, which probably gave all of the Utah fans a little bit of a scare. Having won all those games in the regular season, you don't want to have put all that hard work to just get knocked out in the first round. But no, probably a surprise win from them in the first game. Made a lot of sense, maybe, with no Donovan Mitchell in the lineup. So Jazz's number one option wasn't there. And just some big games, really, from, I think, both Ja Morant and Dylan Brooks. Also, especially Ja, I think, in the clutch. And that fourth quarter was really coming through and kind of taking that win kind of for the Grizzlies. In general, kind of across the series, the Grizzlies just showed kind of moments and streaks of really good play, but I don't think they could just consistently do that. And they won certain quarters, but then lost other ones and more important ones in the third and the fourth. And the Jazz were just at some points just like on all cylinders, had their whole supporting cast, kind of Joe Ingles, Jordan Clarkson, all kind of firing well, like a well kind of oiled machine. So. And the Grizzlies couldn't quite handle that. And then once Mitchell came back into the fold as well, kind of after that first game, he really made a big appearance. Was it 28 and a half points for this series? I mean, Ja 30 points the whole game. What do you think of Ja, Alex? Like people recently saying he's going to be potential MVP of this league one day. Has he got that kind of capability, do you think?
I think one day is the key part of that sentence. I think, obviously we've seen what he can do, and averaging 30.2 points a game, and almost 5 rebounds and 8 assists over a 5-game series against a pretty strong Utah Jazz team is well, it's credit to him. He's done very well there, and I'm not knocking the Grizzlies, but I do think that if they were to go a bit further and challenge, they do need to add some pieces. But no, I definitely think Ja has shown signs of being a very high quality player, and I think coming forward will I think we're in for a treat with what he can offer us. So no, very excited, and then also really excited to see how Donovan Mitchell does. And well, it's nice to see. I know young probably isn't the right word, but sort of like new players, rather than obviously we've had Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, James Harden, all of those names. It's nice to see some new names breaking through and showing us what they're capable of. So yeah, I mean, I think 4-1 is probably a fair result. Would you say?
I think so. I think it's definitely an expected result. You'd probably back the Grizzlies to have stolen at least one game in the series. They're a good enough side, and Jazz, obviously, like we just spoken about, a super talented player who could get a game against most teams. So, no, a expected series, but still exciting. Sorry, and yeah, just really excited for the next few years to see the leaders of both these franchises and what they can do, and how far they can go. And the Jazz this year, obviously, how far they can go this year.
No, definitely. And, well, without further ado, we'll move on to the next game in the West. And we have the LA Clippers against the Dallas Mavericks, which was, I think, arguably one of the series of round one. I think, the Clippers, I'm not bitter at all that they took Kawhi. It's fine. They managed to pull through, and they got that 4-3 win over the Mavericks. Do you think that was deserved?
Yeah, I think I agree with you first and foremost about it probably being the best series, I think, in the whole first round. Just two teams, I think they've had some history in the bubble as well last year. just like a lot of tension between these teams, right? There's always kind of the Clippers kind of remind me of a. I don't want to say a bad boy Pistons because they're not. They're a poor man's bad boy Pistons. But like, do you know what I mean? Quite aggressive with like Morris and Beverly and kind of all of those players, kind of causing and Abu Cousins like causing a lot of aggression towards Doncic and trying to get him off his game that way. I mean, didn't particularly work. They won, but 35 points per game. But no, like you're saying, I think it was definitely my favorite series to watch. Just a really back and forth effort. Kawhi versus Doncic was incredible. You kind of felt quite confident because the Mavs went up 2-0 at the start. So you were thinking, okay, wow, this might be the kind of time. But then just their defense wasn't there. They couldn't slow down the Clippers when they got clicking. They just couldn't find a way to stop them. I am surprised in the. Let me get your kind of take on this, because the Clippers like formed together, right, and they were known as this defensive kind of superhouse. Really, if you think about it, kind of Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Patrick Beverly, kind of Marcus Morris, like all known as quite tough, resilient defenders. But in most of the regular season and now the playoffs, this hasn't been the case. They've obviously like Doncic has averaged 35 points a game, and you've got 3 capable defenders to defend him. So, why do you think that's kind of been the case? Why is that happening?
Well, I don't want to say that Nick Nurse is the key to Kawhi performing well, but you know, he brings out the best in him. What can I say? I think the thing with the Clippers for me, obviously, when they signed Kawhi, it was obviously one of those things they were touted. Kawhi was going to win his 3rd ring with a 3rd different team. So, it's just sort of. I'm trying to think of a comparison, but they haven't hit the heights that we've expected them to do, and. Yeah, obviously you talked about those names that they have, but maybe it's a case of they just haven't found that right rotation that fits for their starting 5, because the NBA is not a league that you can walk through and win just because you have good players. You still do have to play some very good quality players and teams that are willing to fight, and I think the Mavericks embody that sort of fighting spirit, even though they're not the best team in the league. So, no, I think the Clippers maybe... it's difficult for me to say because obviously I'm not a coach, but maybe they're still trying to find their rhythm, and maybe we need a few more years yet of them gelling together. But can they afford to take a few more years before they lose
that's the big question, players? Isn't it? Whether they can haven't signed those on those big contracts, and I think they're coming up to expire. I think Paul George I think is re-signed, but Kawhi is I think on a contract year or something. But yeah, it's whether they can kind of afford to. I think I'm kind of inclined to agree with you. The kind of coaching scheme, the schemes they put forward just don't seem quite right to defend. Apparently, the whole series there wasn't much scheme changes to that. They wouldn't. They'd use the same thing against Doncic and he'd keep scoring on them. There wasn't much change or adaptation to Doncic's play. So I think potentially a coaching issue there. I don't know, but regardless, a really good series. The shame when it came to Game 7, the Mavs couldn't quite step up. Doncic still had a very good game, but again, not the best performance from the Mavs kind of role players. And this whole series, one particular role player who they tout as their 2nd best player, and is a super talented player, but inconsistent in terms of health and performance is Porzingis. But what do you think about his kind of performance? And then kind of can he really be your second option, do you think, as in a championship team?
Well, it's an interesting one because obviously I remember when he came through into the league and everyone was thinking this is going to be the next, superstar. But he hasn't quite lived up to that bill, and I think whether like you said that sort of fit in that Mavs team with Doncic, whether he can be that sort of, it's difficult because whether he's used to being that superstar or whether he wants to be in the shadow a player like Luka Doncic, who's arguably the star man for that Mavericks and, well, one of the star men of the league. I think it may be something that he needs to adapt to, or maybe he just wants something different. I think it's a shame when a player like this doesn't live up to their potential, but it does happen. Not every player is gonna live up to their potential. They're not gonna reach the heights that they're expected, and sometimes the pressure can get too much, which is unfortunate. But that is life and part and parcel of being in the NBA. So whether it's just him not being up to it or whether he needs a change, but then people could argue he's already had a change. He was at the Knicks and now he's at the Mavs. So is it him or is it the team he's with? So
yeah,
be interesting to see how that pans out. So that ended 4-3. The next one almost as entertaining. The Nuggets, who, if I had to pick a team, I won't show any bias, but if I had to pick a team to win it this year that's left, I will pick the Nuggets. They beat the Trailblazers 4-2. Quite a good performance from the Nuggets. Nikola Jokic averaging 33 points, 10 rebounds, and almost 5 assists. Managing
the
to
MVP look at Nikola Jokic now, isn't he?
The MVP. So what a performance from the Nuggets, and maybe that sort of icing on the cake. Obviously, they'd love to win the whole thing, but for Jokic, he's obviously very happy with that. And the Blazers just didn't seem to have an answer for him. Do you think this is because I've always seen the Portland Trailblazers as a team that they're always there or thereabouts. A bit like, I don't know, Arsenal or Spurs. They never quite reach the heights that you want them to. Well, not that I want Spurs to reach heights, but yeah.
I know a few of our friends who are Spurs fans who won't like you saying that.
Too many. But yeah, do you think it's a case of them lacking pieces, or is it just a case of other teams being better than them?
You know what I think? Like, it could be a bit of both, but like that all kind of always quite intertwined, isn't it? Kind of that all kind of contributes. Like I said, firstly, like it was just an outstanding effort from the Denver Nuggets, and especially Nikola Jokic with his running mate, second best player in Jamal Murray, a star of the bubble last year, not there. For him to step up, average those sort of points, and contribute in that dominant kind of way, alongside their role players coming through with Michael Porter Jr. kind of, and like Aaron Gordon, like all the other kind of players contributing as well. I think we still just need to kind of tip our hats off to them for being able to kind of do that. And yeah, on the Blazers side, it was a bit disappointing, really. Like, Dame was Dame, right? Had some unbelievable game. He was he's incredible, isn't he? His guns from deep, like he just comes down the court, and you just think as soon as he crosses the half court line, you're like, all right, you have to guard him from there, which is just incredible. I find it's mind blowing. And like he had some outstanding games. Game 5 record 12 threes in an overtime game. But I feel like it's just a classic story with them, right? It's Dame and CJ puts up a load of points, then they can't defend. And some games they don't put up points and they still can't defend. And so I think they haven't, like you said, continuously happened in the playoffs. They've kind of gone through series and lost and gone to the second and first rounds. They finally made a change with Terry Stotts now leaving, or mutually deciding to leave. So they, I think, know that there's going to be some real changes needed there, and also probably some roster tweaks, I think, to be able to take that next step and be an actual championship contending team rather than kind of a top-tier playoff team, I'd say, or mid-tier playoff team.
Yeah, well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And to round off this Western Conference round 1 playoff summary, we'll head a little bit further south. We've gone from Colorado and Portland to now Phoenix and Los Angeles. This was upset. Is that the right word? An upset? It's difficult because obviously you expect a team with LeBron James to win, but then when it's just sort of you get the impression sometimes it is just obviously AD coming in with 34 points in the second game. Lakers taking a big advantage with Chris Paul's injury in game 2 as well. Then obviously AD coming out of game 4 with a groin injury, that did affect them quite a lot because, with no AD, there wasn't that defensive anchor. And well, it's sort of it panned out. It was quite a sad ending for AD. Really, it's sort of he tried to come back in game 6, but then I guess the niggle just hadn't gone away, and he just couldn't quite get it. So yeah, I guess it was a disappointing end for the series for the Lakers. Would you say the Suns deserved it, or was it more just? I mean, we always talk about this when the big team is like in the FA Cup. When the big team loses, we talk about them losing. We never talk about the brilliant performance from the Suns. And Devin Booker making his playoff debut, averaging practically 30 points it's fantastic.
No, I think you're right. Like, it always gets talked about how the failures of the big side to do it, not the kind of skill and kind of just real performance of the kind of unexpected sides. And that really was, like you said, Devin Booker's first playoff series. To do that, come up against a guy who has never ever lost in the first round, and just his general stature in LeBron James, and having had a Phoenix team which have been pretty dire for the last however long, a long time, to have taken that step and to be able to beat, although a depleted Lakers towards the end of the series, they're former champions, right? Still a former championship team, still some of that core remained, and they said that the core, that the additions they made in the previous free agency uplifted that team. So I think hats off to Phoenix in that sense. Chris Paul and Monty Williams just have done an amazing job, kind of leading that team, kind of making it all work. They just got a really nice kind of balance, kind of score and attack, and then long defenders, good veterans like Jay Crowder and those sort of players. Cameron Payne's now stepped up kind of out of nowhere, who was almost out of the league and now has kind of found a nice slot off the bench of them. So it's just everything with the Phoenix organization has just turned around completely. And yeah, like you said, I think it'd be reminiscent not to just say how impressive they were throughout the series to get that win. And we'll briefly touch on it now, I think. But what does this do for the legacy of Mr. LeBron James after, like I said, his first playoff exit in the first round ever? Obviously, last year with the win, he's gone up to 4 championships, 2 off the GOAT, I guess. Some would say, some would not. Most people would say. What do you think this does for his legacy?
Well, he's definitely fallen behind. I've certainly never lost in the round 1 of the playoffs. So LeBron, you step up, mate. It's just not good enough. Joking aside, I do think, obviously we saw what he was capable of last year with the Lakers. They did win it, and well, it's a difficult one. You never want to make any rash decisions, but I can see the Lakers will probably add some players. They'll need that extra piece. Obviously, whether AD's fit for the whole year, because I don't think LeBron can do it on his own. That's for sure. I think he does need that extra help in defense as well as offense. I think it's key to have both of them. So yeah, the Lakers need to add a few players, maybe 1 or 2, just to shore up that team. But it's obviously, like I think I talked about this with you a while ago, that LeBron likes to play every single game, and we talked about this with Kawhi. He sits out quite a lot of the season, and he's good come the playoffs. Is that something LeBron needs to look at now, coming towards the end of his? I'm not saying the end of his career, but he's in the twilight years of his career, so maybe he needs to look at managing his game load a little bit more, so that come the big games he is ready and fit to go. And the same with AD, whether he can afford to play all the games in the season, whether he needs to rest out for quite a lot of them as well. So questions to be looked at there for the Lakers, I think. But
no, definitely, I agree with the point about them needing to enforce that kind of defensive presence. I think actually it wasn't until after the loss of Howard and McGee to play those centre minutes was quite big. I think I know they had Montrezl Harrell and Marc Gasol, but they're not the same type of defenders as Marc Gasol at one point was, but is much more of a different defender than he was back in his prime. And the more minutes AD plays at that centre position, probably the more damage he's going to get, and risk of injury kind of goes up. Because like when he wasn't playing, they just couldn't. The paint was wide open. The Suns just wreaked havoc there. So yeah, I think we both agree on that there needs to be some addressing in terms of the defensive personnel for the Lakers. But yeah, that was the West.
That was the West. We'll take a flight. I think the next flight leaves to Philadelphia. Do you fancy going to Philadelphia, James?
Were you going to take a little
plane
segment off, or we go straight on?
I think should we have a little water break and then go straight into Philadelphia versus Wizards? If you've got a Gatorade nearby, make sure you fuel up. Gatorade, if you feel like sponsoring us, do hop on that. Send us an email.
This is not a paid commercial. This is not yet.
not yet. No.
Manifest.
Get whatever you drink. Water, orange juice. Make sure it's fresh, and we'll see you in the next part. Well, welcome back. We're in the East now. We've taken our plane. It was a little bit expensive, but it's worth it. It's worth it. So we hope you're all fueled up with whatever beverage you decided to drink in that little break there. We're going to head straight to the first game in the East that we're going to look at is the Philadelphia 76ers against the Washington Wizards. Quite a convincing performance from Philly. 4-1 over 5 games. So to sum it up, I think man of the series for Philly was probably Tobias Harris, averaging 25 points, 10 rebounds, and almost 4 assists, which is pretty good. And then obviously we can't forget Joel Embiid. So having those two powerhouses really did help. And well, the Washington Wizards just didn't seem to have an answer for them, did they?
No, I think managed to get one game in there, but generally a pretty comfortable victory, I'd say, for Philadelphia. Just quite like opposing teams, really. I think Philly this year, with the introduction of Doc Rivers and Daryl Morey into the kind of set up behind the scenes, the non-player personnel, has brought a lot more kind of clarity and focus, and they seem to be a lot more consistent with their performances, and everyone seems to know their role. Players seem to be clicking a lot more kind of happier. I mean, you just got to see the progress of Tobias Harris and Joel Embiid from last year to this year. Joel Embiid, without the kind of injuries he got, arguably would have been the MVP, or at least very close next to Jokic. And then Tobias Harris, it seems to be that Doc just knows how to find the best in him, really. And you know what, they really needed that because of the big contract that Tobias Harris was given. Deserved at the time, but then last year you were thinking, oh God, is this one of those contracts where you're the GM regretting what you did and sort of thing? But this series, at least, he showed that he did deserve that money and that he played well throughout the game. And just see what you think, Alex, on the Wizards. Kind of what do you think kind of went wrong for them? What stops them from getting to that next level?
It's a good question. I think obviously with a player like Russell Westbrook, you expect him to be the star man there, but then obviously he can't do everything by himself. I think Bradley Beal does offer some coverage in that sense, but then come the big games, I just don't think they have enough experience. It goes back to that, looking at the Grizzlies, sort of like, do they have enough game time experience in the playoffs, and the only way of getting that is signing players. You can't sort of develop that over a long period of time because it takes too long and players will want to leave. And well, we saw some controversy there with when Westbrook went off injured in game 2 and a fan poured popcorn on top of him, and
You got that, yeah.
it all happened. It was all happening around the league. I believe a fan got arrested in the Celtics game for throwing a water bottle at Kyrie Irving. So if you're watching the games, please do refrain from throwing stuff at the players. They are there to provide entertainment, so don't go ruining that for everyone else. So yeah, no, I think the Wizards, just in a way, just not good enough. I think they need to add players before they're going to be competing against the likes of Philly. And I'm not saying Philly are a bad team, but they are beatable. So it's definitely a case of them finding that extra player. Obviously, we have seen that they can beat Philly. They did, and they managed to in game 4. So it shows they're capable of doing it. But yeah, I just do think they're lacking a few pieces before they are going to be able to go on and compete with the big guns, if that makes sense. So that sort of rounds off that game. It's quite a convincing win for the 76ers there. Moving across to the almost New York area, Brooklyn, Boston, we have the Nets against the Celtics. The Nets, again, showing that big three that they have does really, really help, doesn't it? I think, 4-1 against a fairly strong Celtic team. Obviously, they are missing players, and certain players that I won't name names are underperforming, and I'm sure we'll get more into that in the next minute or so. But yeah, it quite an easy run through there for the Nets, wouldn't you say?
I think, yeah, in general, quite pretty convincing, isn't it? 4-1 kind of victory. I think just what was impressive is there was a lot of doubters in the Nets. I mean, obviously, everyone knows they have 3 superstars, but there was a kind of talk of only one ball, a lot of ball dominant players. Can they coexist and find a way to win? Where's the defensive kind of personnel? Like, how are they going to stop people? But I mean, they've shown to be pretty comfortable there in that series. There didn't seem to be any worries at all. I think what doesn't get talked enough as well though is, whilst you've seen like in the first game Durant with 32, Kyrie 29, Harden 21, and then game 4 they combined for 104 points. So like, whilst that is amazing, you also got to think about kind of their role players have also really stepped up. Kind of Joe Harris, role player, hard to tell, role player on 80 million or how much he's on, I can't remember. But he combined with Durant, 51 in game 2. And just other kind of players, Tyler Johnson, Jeff Green, Blake Griffin starting to shrug off the kind of, what did they say about him? He was kind of washed and kind of like he's starting to get rid of that tagline. So I think that needs to definitely get some praise. It's they've now, without much time all together because of the injuries they've experienced during the regular season, they are really starting to click and come in the playoffs, which is just, I think, mightily impressive. But what do you think, Alex, regarding the Celtics in this series? Kind of, obviously, disappointing, probably not unexpected. Like, they knew that they were kind of undermanned without Jaylen Brown, and in all likelihood were going to struggle in this series. But look, very, very young team, but have had a lot of playoff games and not got to the kind of level that the Boston Celtics fan base and ownership probably want. So what do you think for them the next moves are? They're already taking a few moves. I don't know if you saw about Danny Ainge, their GM, having left, and Brad Stevens being promoted upwards, and then they're now on a new coaching search. Do you reckon that's the right direction? That's the right thing they're doing?
Well, I think time will tell, but then I'm always nervous when teams make decisions like this, because obviously they did get beaten convincingly by the Nets. But it is like you said, they were missing Jaylen Brown. The player that I said I wouldn't name earlier, Kemba Walker, I don't think he was up to scratch in that series. So you can't leave it all on one man. And as good as Jason Tatum is, he can't do everything for you. And I think they will. I'll say it again. This is another team that probably needs to add a few more pieces before they are competing with the big guns. And whether that change will work, we'll have to wait and see. But I think the thing is with the Nets is they shouldn't get too downhearted because missing a key player in Jaylen Brown does hurt you, and when you have those two players to rely on, you can do a lot better, and it takes the pressure off the star man or one of the main guys. So yeah, I wouldn't get too disheartened. Obviously, they didn't have a brilliant season, finishing with a record of 36-36, but at the end of the day, they're not going to compete every year. So maybe it is a sort of a transition year. So no, I think not a frantic worrying period for Boston, but definitely pieces to add there, I think. So with that being said, we'll go on to, what was probably one of the most convincing wins of round one, actually. I think it was...
I'm going to decline to comment on this series because it's a deep personal matter, and I feel quite upset about it. So I don't know if I can comment.
Do you want to tell us what happened, or do you want me to?
Go on, have a go.
So
slow story, yeah.
The Milwaukee Bucks.
Remember we got in the playoffs. Just remember that. You have to make it into this.
That's a good point. Nick Nurse, get on that. We want to be back in it next year. The Milwaukee Bucks, third seed, go through with a 4-0 drubbing of the Miami Heat, who is sixth seed. It was, apart from game one, pretty wide open, I'd say. Obviously, Bam Adebayo averaging around 15 points, 9 rebounds, and about 4 assists, being the star man for Miami in that series. But apart from Butler forcing overtime in game one, there was never really any competition. The Bucks winning by 34 points in game two, convincingly again 113-84 in game three, and winning by 17 in the final game. So as a Miami fan, are you disappointed, or could you see this coming?
No, mixed feelings, but generally quite disappointed. Look, I think there was some there needs to be some realism. The bubble run we went on was probably did better than we probably should have, in the sense that team there were better teams that got knocked out before that when we got further from. Do you get what I mean? We obviously, I think that needs to be considered. But generally, there was just I don't think a player who's averaging 15.5 as your top scorer throughout the series means you can win all too much. That's just not enough of someone making a really active contribution on the scoring end. Which I was worried coming into the season that was our downfall. I was hoping Victor Oladipo at that addition, if he was up to his former self, but obviously with his injuries and meant that he's not that guy. I think we'll need to kind of address that in free agency and find a kind of a new person and get back to where we kind of should be. But there's other things as well. You've got Tyler Hero last year was kind of absolute gun in the bubble and scoring for fun, but I think he was about 32% the whole of this series, so down super low from his 40% last year, and shooting really low percentages from the field as well. So no, we were very much humbled by a very talented Milwaukee Bucks team, which seems to have kind of walked all over us, sadly.
These things do happen. I must say it's been many a year for me as a Toronto Raptors fan where we've done well in the regular season and then we've come up against LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers and they've just swept us aside. So I know your pain. It will pass. So, and yeah, I think like you said, the Bucks are a very good team. So you can't fault Miami too much. And I think, I mean, this is the big question: is Jimmy Butler the man that's going to take you to that title, or do you need to find that next star? Do you think?
I think this has always been the kind of challenge of Jimmy, because almost wants to always be the man in the situation where he is, but is he enough of a man to win you the title? And like, if you're looking at this series, you'd say no, but if you're looking at the bubble, he almost did it. So it's a tricky one. Do you know what? I think you could have Jimmy as the alpha and him. He contributes. He contributes to winning basketball, but not in a scoring sense, which makes him quite unique. He's kind of contributing a lot of other facets and scores and comes up big in the last, when it counts, sort of moments. So I think if he was able to stick with that and keep doing that, we just need someone who's become more of a volume scorer, who can put up those points, who can give the ball, and we know, do you know what, you're getting 20 every night at least, like 20, 25. And I think the front office knows that, and we'll hopefully try and resurrect that. Still not sure that's quite enough to win, but it's definitely enough to make us more competitive.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And well, I think I was listening to a Giannis interview after, I think it was Game 4, and he said we didn't want to play with our food, which I thought was quite damning from him. So yeah, I think
can't wait to get swept by the Bucks.
Yeah.
So by the Nets, sorry.
Yeah, we'll be cheering on the Nets in that next round. Well, it'll be interesting to see whether Giannis can act on those comments and whether he can actually win a title for once. Only jiving at you, Giannis. If you're listening, I'm sorry. I really am. Moving on to the last game, we have the New York Knicks against the Atlanta Hawks. The Knicks back in the Garden with fans. Could they do it? No. They lost 4-1 to the Atlanta Hawks in a game, well, in a series that Trae Young dominated. I think he's slowly, maybe even quickly becoming my new favourite player outside of the Raptors organisation. I do really like Trae Young, averaging almost 30 points, 3 rebounds and 10 assists. That's pretty good, that is. And well, the only match that the Knicks really had was Julius Randle, who averaged 18 points, 12 rebounds and 4 assists, which to go through in a series, you can't do that. So yeah, thoughts on that matchup there?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The first year on Trae Young, he also, local stat, he's now in good company with Michael Jordan as the only visiting players with 3 straight 30-point games at MSG. So he's joining quite elite company there. No thoughts on this series. I really wanted the Knicks to do it. I really wanted them to continue on that form and go far. And going into it, I thought they might have a real chance. I was just there do you know what I mean? It depends. I'm not sure. Atlanta aren't a very experienced side. They lost Rajon Rondo to the Clippers, right? And I know they gained Lou Will, but someone with very valuable playoff experience. So I was there okay, so maybe they might be a bit unstable. But they've proven us wrong, and the Knicks haven't. Sadly, there was a worry of a Tibbs-led team is sort of like this. It's powerful in the regular season, and then are pretty tired and worn down by the when it comes to the playoffs. And they did look at the Knicks, to be honest. Do you know what? Julius Randle wasn't able to continue that incredible season he's had into the playoffs. Generally not much support from the supporting cast. Derrick Rose, to be fair, was the one I think arguably the best Knicks player. I doesn't say he wasn't the series leader, but in general, he had some big games where he tried to drag the Knicks back into it. But do you know what? If you're a Knicks fan and you got told, okay, you'll get to the first round of the playoffs this year, at the start of the year, I think they would have taken that, because they were probably thinking lottery at the start. So whilst it is disappointing they couldn't go further, I am still proud in the sense of them having changed so much from the last year. That is still credible and good for the league. When the Knicks are good, the league is better, isn't it? So, no, very pleased and just excited to see how the Hawks get on in the next kind of round and maybe onwards.
Indeed. Well, the Hawks are, I think, probably underdogs for this whole thing, but I would be very happy if they did go all the way and win it. I think they're a nice little team there, and they've had their fair share of struggle over the last few years. So, if they do deserve it, this is the year for them. So that sort of rounds off our analysis of round one of the playoffs. If you think we've missed anything, then do write us in, and we will try and back ourselves up. But we do our best. We do our best. So thank you, James, for providing, as ever, top quality analysis there. And well, for our last little section that we're going to do after we've had another hydration break, because the heat does get to me in this, and it's sitting in here with my window closed, so that just so I don't want anyone to hear any motorbike noises, because it might be a little bit distracting. So I'm sitting here in some very, very scorching heat, but I'm ready for another hydration break. And after that, we will be talking about the round 2 of the playoffs, or the next round, and giving our predictions. And well, see you in the next section. And we're back. We're hydrated and we're ready to go. This is going to be our last section of this podcast. I know you're all so sad to hear us go, but we'll be back very soon, don't worry. And hopefully a shorter break than last time, because it's playoff season. It's getting interesting. So let's talk about the conference semi-finals, James. So we've got the Utah Jazz against the Clippers. Utah, at the time of recording this, Utah are winning 1-0 in the series. Then we have the Phoenix Suns against the Denver Nuggets. The Suns lead 2-0. This is all at the time of recording as well. That's on the side. We've got Philadelphia, we've got Atlanta. They're tied at 1-1, so that's hotting up to be quite an interesting series there. And then finally, something that I think will make both of us very happy, actually. Milwaukee are getting on their way to getting swept by the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are winning 2-0 there. So quickly, let's just run through them all. So start off with the Jazz and the Clippers. How do you see that one going? It's 1-0 to the Jazz so far.
Yeah, no, we'll keep this quick. We won't do too much analysis. We'll save that for next week. But I'm probably going to think it's going to be another long one, I think. I think the Clippers have so much talent, even though they haven't quite yet sorted out the defensive issues. Maybe they will in this series. But I think it's going to be a long one. But I really do, having seen how comfortably Utah played against Memphis in that series once after that first game, had Donovan Mitchell back in the lineup, I am quite confident in them, especially at home. They seem to have put a little fortress up there. So I'm going to say the Utah Jazz in 6.
Ooh, that sounds entertaining. So moving to Colorado and Arizona.
You're not often return. Are you just taking the easy way out?
Go on then. I'll give you a prediction. I'm going to go 4-1 Utah.
Oh wow! So you're very much in the Jazz fan.
I am a Jazz
shareholder
fan.
practically in them.
I do. I sort of, not that I'm bitter towards Kawhi for leaving Toronto as well. I think it was a personal decision. I think he was allowed to do that. But I just really like the Jazz this year. I think they're going to do very well. So 4-1 the Utah. Then we have the Denver Nuggets against the Phoenix Suns. That's currently 2-0 to the Suns. And I did say earlier I wanted the Nuggets to win if I had to pick one team now. Doesn't quite look like that's going to happen. And off the bat, I'm going to go with 4-0 Suns. James, what are you going for?
Oh, no, I'm going to go 4-1, I reckon the Denver will at least steal a game. Jokic managed to win 4 games against the Blazers. I know the Suns are a better team than the Blazers. But also Michael Leonard, I think, just recently put... last game, he was saying something like there was one team there that wanted to win and there was one that definitely didn't. And so he's quite good at, I think, sometimes kind of lighting the fire underneath them and getting them to play to bounce back. So I imagine at least one game. So yeah, I'm going to go 4-1.
Okay. So that is the 2 games out of 4 done. We've got 2 left. Philadelphia 76ers against the Atlanta Hawks. It's 1-1 at the moment. So quite an interesting series so far. I think this could go the distance, and I'm going to go 4-3 Philly.
Interesting. No, I'm very torn on this one. I feel like you're like, it could either go that way or Atlanta could sort of lose it a bit and not be able to kind of continue that streak, because they are still quite a young team. But there's still some players who've, I think Bogdan Bogdanovic has really, he's really class. Okay, I'm not quite as close. I think Philadelphia 4-2.
4-2. Okay, Philadelphia. So if anyone's from Philly listening, well, if we're wrong, then we put a curse. It's the big man, not the big man curse on Philadelphia. This one I think is more of an obvious choice. The Bucks against the Nets. I'm going 4-0 to the Nets.
I'm as well. I think it's still quite unpopular because the Milwaukee just beat Miami. It's sad to say it again, but they did beat Miami 4-0. So it is. But I feel like Giannis hasn't played particularly well in these last 2 games. And I think he is the kind of, obviously the best player. And like, it's almost quite demoralising for other players if they see him not being able to contribute on the twin stage. They don't have that self-belief. Having said that, I don't know if they could. It could go another way. But yeah, I'm actually with the agreement with you on that one. 4-0.
4-0. Well, let's hope the Nets do pull through with that, because I've got nothing against the Bucks, but I would just like to see the Nets do well. I think to shut the haters up, as they would say. So that concludes our short and brief, but also really lovely analysis. Not to big ourselves up too much here. No, we will end it there. We will bring you more analysis and our thoughts next week, or whenever we record this next podcast. It could be next week. It could be most likely when the next round of the playoffs ends, so the conference semi-finals, and then we'll have the conference finals and then the finals. So it's all hotting up to be a very interesting playoff finish. So thank you, James, for coming on.
That's all right.
And well, we'll see everyone. Well, we won't see you. We'll be with you very shortly. And I hope you've enjoyed this podcast very much. I've been Alex. He's been James, and you've been listening to the Big Man and the Not So Big Man podcast. Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.